In this video today, we are talking about food and does it cause diverticulitis and diverticular disease. So there are many stories about this, that eating a certain food can cause a flare or eating too much food can cause a flare. Well, let's smash some of the myths, let's prove some of the truths about certain foods, and let's also talk about whether food can cause diverticulitis to occur or not. If you're new here, I'm a family medicine doctor. If this kind of stuff interests you, we talk about medicine and lifestyle, so please smash the like button and subscribe. So let's talk about, do certain foods cause flare-ups of diverticulitis and whether that is true or not. So first and foremost, certain foods do not cause diverticular disease, but let's get into it. So what is diverticular disease? What is diverticulitis? So these are the two main things that we need to cover first and foremost. So diverticular disease is when you have pouches forming in the large intestine. We won't get into the specifics. We have other videos about that, but that's what diverticular disease is. Diverticulitis is when those pouches become inflamed and infected, and then they lead to problems and development of signs and symptoms such as pain, bowel changes, blood in the stool, fever, and other systemic upset. So as you can see here, diverticular disease is not diverticulitis. So it's not whether a food can cause you to actually have diverticular disease. We're not talking about that. We're talking mainly about whether diverticulitis can occur. So a flare-up can occur from certain foods. Nuts, seeds, popcorn, spicy food. So there was this popular belief that these things would cause a potential flare-up from happening. So they would cause the pouches, trapping of the pouches, and they would cause irritation and infection then to occur. However, recent research has shown that there is not enough evidence to support this theory. So this is firmly a myth. And to back that up even more, to be honest, there are even more studies that show, you can please Google these, you can see that things like nuts, for example, have high amounts of omega-3 fatty acids, alpha-linoleic acid, for example, and that these foods like nuts contain beneficial things due to their anti-inflammatory properties and their wide-ranging effects on the rest of the body in terms of heart health, eye health, brain health, and so on. But the main thing is that it's an anti-inflammatory component. That leads us then to the things that are inflammatory. So processed foods. Processed foods have been shown to potentially contribute to inflammation of the gut, which could trigger a flare of diverticulitis. So it's important to note that everybody's body is different. So what may trigger a flare in one person may not necessarily affect the other. But overall, this is the example. So there is inflammation, there is increased gut permeability there, and diet is something that is the biggest modifiable environmental risk factor. So make your food at home. That puts you at a higher chance of avoiding additives and poisonous substances that are hiding in your food. So when we think about then, an extension of that is the gut microbiome. So when these things get compromised, you have the dysbiosis occurring, so the gut bacteria get all out of sorts, you have increased permeability, and then the flow of things, of waste essentially through your large intestine gets compromised, so the gastric motility gets compromised, and then you have a bit of an IBS kind of a picture. So when that happens, then it's not as easy as just eating a bit more fiber and things get back to normal. So what you eat and when you eat is very important. Check out our other video on that we made. Very detailed analysis of that. But overall, the more fiber you eat, the less likely you are to form diverticular disease, so the pouches from forming. But when you're having a flare, necessarily loading up on fiber may not be the best idea when you're having symptoms and when you're experiencing symptoms that are occurring. So that's something to note. But a lack of fiber does not trigger an attack. But what it does do, it boosts your chance of preventing diverticular disease from happening, because at the end of the day, lack of fiber is a modern problem. So we live in a world where our guts are being tortured. So what that means is our microbiome is being tortured. Our microbiome is something quite sacred. I mean, there's more bacteria in your gut than there are cells in your human body. So that's wild to think about on its own. But they even did a study recently on hunter-gatherer population. So people from the same genetic pool, as you can see here, the same color, the same genetic pool, they moved to an urban setting compared to their more rural setting, and then they monitored the amount of stool that they were producing. So that's a good way of finding out how much fiber we're eating, how much stool we are producing. And lo and behold, the urban dwellers produced 8 times less pounds per day of stool. That's wild to think about. And conveniently enough, there was noticed that there was no diverticular disease in the rural people. So it's truly a Western disease, a Western illness. So prevention, that's the main aim of the game here. So well, the aim is to prevent disease and to optimize gut function. So start by eating more fiber. That's a good start. But again, it's important to know when and where you're eating it. So you can have things like bone broth, like clove tea. So those, for example, in the initial phases of having a flare-up, they're potent in nutrients, antibacterial properties, polyphenols, things like that. But ultimately, you can put yourself in a position where you're not having as many flares and you're not getting diverticular disease at all. But the gist of it is that there's no specific trigger food for diverticulitis, for a flare-up of happening. But what you eat matters, and when you eat it matters, because you may be in a position where your gut microbiome and the bacteria in your gut are so compromised already that just adding a little bit of fiber or something like that won't help necessarily too much. We need to optimize our gut function, because the more we live like this, the higher our chances are of becoming unhealthy. And what I mean by that, it's not just a vague term, but when we're talking about the gut, it essentially destroys your microbiome. It creates a very big imbalance of good bacteria and bad bacteria. You get inflammation, you get gut issues. So the more we poison disease, and you get systemic issues. We will be. So the more we consume poison, the more poisoned we will become. So focus on those things, not necessarily on a specific food or not. That's the main message of this video. So please like and subscribe for more. Leave your comments in the section below. What do you think about this whole diverticular disease story and diverticulitis story? We'll see you in the next video.